Right now, without standing up, your body can do a handful of strange, specific things, and you have probably never tested a single one of them. Each one is a quirk written into how you were built. Some are leftovers from ancestors who climbed trees. Some your science teacher flat out lied to you about. We are going to run 7 quick tests right here, and you are going to keep score. Whatever number you land on, drop it in the comments. Let us find out how weird you actually are. The wrist tendon. Touch your thumb to your pinky, bend your wrist toward you, and look at the inside of your forearm. If a thin cord just popped up under the skin, you are flexing a muscle your tree-dwelling ancestors used to climb. That cord is the Palmaris longus, and it is our first test because it is beautifully simple. About 85 to 90% of people have it, and roughly 10 to 15% are missing it entirely. The gradient tracks ancestry. Absence runs around 25% in European populations and as low as 4% in East Asian populations, with worldwide estimates ranging anywhere from 1.5% to over 60% depending on the group. It is a vestigial flexor, a leftover from primates who needed extra grip for life in the trees. In modern humans, it does almost nothing, which is exactly why hand surgeons love it. If you have one, it is the go-to donor tendon for reconstructive grafts because surgeons can harvest the whole thing and you lose zero grip strength. So the advantage cuts both ways. Have it, and you are carrying a free spare part surgeons can borrow. Miss it, and you never needed it in the first place. It tends to run in families in a roughly dominant pattern, though like most things in this video, the inheritance is messier than a textbook square. So if that cord popped up on your forearm, that's 1 point. Start your tally now. The ear point. Reach up and feel the upper rim of your ear, right where it starts to curve back down. If there is a tiny hard bump hiding there, that is the leftover tip of a pointed ear your ancestors used to swivel toward danger. It is called Darwin's tubercle, named after Charles Darwin, who described it in the opening pages of The Descent of Man in 1871 as living proof of our shared ancestry with pointy-eared mammals. It is an atavism, a structural echo of the folded-over point that animals like cats and monkeys still use to aim their ears at sound. Prevalence is all over the map. Roughly 10% of Spanish adults, around 40% of Indian adults, and a startling 58% of one group of Swedish schoolchildren. For decades, biology classes taught it as a clean, dominant gene. You have the bump, or you do not. Here is the catch, and it is a preview of where this whole video is going. That is wrong. A 1936 twin study found identical twins with the exact same DNA where one had the tubercle and one did not. Modern work suggests it is shaped as much by development and chance in the womb as by any single gene. There is no real trade-off here. It does nothing, costs nothing, and harms nothing. It is pure evolutionary nostalgia, a souvenir from an ear that could once point at a predator. So if you felt that little bump, give yourself a point. The hitchhiker's thumb. Stick your thumb up like you are hailing a ride, then push the top joint back as far as it will go. If the tip bends backward past a steep angle, we are talking 50 degrees or more. Your science teacher owes you an apology. This is distal hyperextensibility of the thumb, better known as hitchhiker's thumb, and somewhere between 25 and 36% of people have it. The flexibility comes from an unusually loose joint and stretchy ligaments at the very tip of the thumb. And here is where the apology comes in. For 70 years, this was the poster child for simple, recessive genetics in classrooms everywhere. A famous 1953 study by Glass and Kistler drew a hard line at 50 degrees, sorted everyone into straight or hitchhiker, and declared it a tidy 2-allele trait. It is not. Later, family studies found 2 straight thumb parents producing hitchhiker kids, and the reverse, both impossible under the simple model. When researchers actually measured thumb angles across a population, they did not get 2 neat camps. They got a smooth bell curve with everything from rigid to rubber band in between. Over 600 DNA markers have been linked to it, and together they explain only about 10% of the variation. So the trade-off is really a reframe. A flexible thumb is not a recessive switch you flipped, it is where you happen to land on a spectrum of connective tissue flexibility, the same laxity that, taken to extremes, shows up in joint hypermobility conditions. So if your thumb bent way back past that line, that's another point. The Greek toe. Kick off a shoe and look down. If your second toe pokes out past your big toe, you have got the foot shape sculptors have been carving onto gods for 3,000 years. A second toe longer than the first is called Morton's toe, or, more flatteringly, the Greek foot, because ancient Greek sculptors treated it as the ideal and chiseled it onto statues of their gods. It is even on the Statue of Liberty. Roughly 20% of people have it, though estimates swing from about 3% to a third depending on the population. Anatomically, it is not actually a long toe. It is a short first metatarsal, the bone behind the big toe, which lets the second toe win the race forward. Now, the name is a trap, so let us kill the myth right now. Having a Greek foot does not mean you have Greek ancestry. It shows up everywhere, named for Greek art, not Greek genes. The genetics is familial, but far from simple. Over 900 markers have been associated with it, and no clean single gene pattern holds. The real trade-off is mechanical. Your first metatarsal is built to carry most of your weight at push-off. When the second one juts forward instead, the load shifts, which is why Morton's toe is linked to calluses and forefoot pain. And, interestingly, why one 2004 study found it more often in professional athletes, where that forefoot loading may actually be an advantage. So if your second toe pushed out in front of the big one, add a point. The finger receipt. Hold your hand up flat and compare two fingers, your index and your ring finger. Whichever one is longer is, supposedly, a receipt your body printed before you were even born. This is the 2D to 4D digit ratio, second digit divided by fourth digit, and it is one of the few traits on this list with a genuine replicated sex difference. On average, men tend to have a ring finger noticeably longer than the index, giving a lower ratio. Women's two fingers tend to sit closer to equal. The leading hypothesis, championed by researcher John Manning back in 1998, is that the ratio is set in the womb by your exposure to prenatal testosterone. More testosterone, longer ring finger. The sex difference even shows up in 2-year-olds, which is genuinely striking. But here is the honest part, and it matters. The internet has turned this finger ratio into a fortune teller for everything from athleticism to aggression to personality. And most of those claims do not hold up. Recent pre-registered studies that measured actual hormone levels in pregnancy found the link to prenatal testosterone is weak and inconsistent at best. So treat your fingers as a fun, real, sexually influenced quirk, not a horoscope. The trade-off here is not biological, it is about honesty. This is a perfect example of a real, measurable trait that got buried under a mountain of overclaiming. Longer ring, longer index, or dead even. Note it down. So if your ring finger is the longer of the two, take a point. The dimple. Give the camera your biggest, fakest smile. If a little crater appears in one or both cheeks, plot twist, you are showing off what anatomists technically file under muscle defect. Cheek dimples are caused by a split in a facial muscle called the zygomaticus major, the one that hauls the corners of your mouth up when you smile. In people with dimples, that muscle is bifid. It forks into two bundles, one above and one below the corner of the mouth. And when you grin, the skin gets tugged inward over the gap, leaving that signature dent. Prevalence varies a lot by population, from around 12% in some European samples up to about 34% in some American ones, landing somewhere near 20% overall, and they show up a bit more often in women. They are usually called a dominant trait, and they do run in families. But the inheritance is irregular and unpredictable enough that geneticists will not commit to a clean, single-gene story. The fun reframe, a feature prized across cultures as a marker of beauty, youth, and good luck, is, structurally, a tiny anatomical quirk in how one smiling muscle decided to grow. Some dimples even fade with age as baby fat disappears and the face lengthens, so it is a trait that can quietly check out on you. Dimples or no dimples, smile logged. So if a dimple showed up when you smiled, that's one more point. The tongue roll. And the famous one, roll your tongue up into a tube. If you can, your 7th grade teacher told you it proves you carry a simple dominant gene. And that little lie is the most important thing in this entire video. Between about 65 and 81% of people can curl the sides of their tongue into a tube, and for the better part of a century, this has been the #1 classroom example of basic Mendelian genetics. The story goes back to the famous geneticist Alfred Sturtevant, who suggested in 1940 that it was a single dominant gene. The problem showed up in 1952, when Philip Matlock studied 33 pairs of identical twins, genetic clones of each other, and found 7 pairs where one twin could roll and the other could not. If it were a single gene, that is impossible. Sturtevant himself later wrote that he was embarrassed to see it still taught as a settled Mendelian case. Some non-rollers can even learn to do it with practice. So if you are able to roll your tongue up into a tube, that's another point. So, here is the closer, the real payoff of all 7 tests. Almost none of these are clean on-off switches. The tendon, the ear point, the thumb, the toe, the fingers, the dimples. Every single one is shaped by many genes, by development, by environment, by sheer chance in the womb. The neat "you have the gene or you do not" story is the actual myth. You are not a checklist of dominant and recessive switches. You are a one-time, unrepeatable mosaic of thousands of genes negotiating with a lifetime of accidents. So whoever just scored a messy, mixed, does not fit the textbook number, that was never the exception. That is the statistical norm. That is what every human is. Your score was never a measure of how rare you are. It was a measure of how gloriously complicated one person can be. Now we want to know. Drop your number in the comments. How many did you land on, and where does your ancestry trace to? Let us see who owns this channel.